وقل رب زدني علما.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So we're going through this eighth narration of Adab al-Mufrad, and Ibn Umar radiyallahu anhu mentions about the kaba'ir. So yesterday we very briefly and very quickly also we went through what constitutes kabira, what is the meaning of a sin being a major sin. Now, what are the total number of kaba'ir? So here in this narration he's mentioning 9. In other narrations there are other numbers that are mentioned. For example, in a narration of Sahih al-Bukhari, only 7 of the 9 are mentioned. So Imam Bukhari rahmallah, he quoted what he sent to Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu in his Sahih, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Ijtanibu as-sab'a al-mubiqat," that avoid and stay away from 7 destructive sins. And then the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Wama hunna?" What are those sins which could destroy a person? So of course, if a sin can destroy a person, it means that it is a major sin. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam responded and said, "Ash-shirku billah والسحر وقتل النفس التي حرم الله إلا بالحق وأكل الربا وأكل مال اليتيم والتولي يوم الزحف وقذف المحسنات المؤمنات الغافلات." So you can see it's 7 of the 9 that are mentioned here: associating partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sorcery, unjustly killing a soul that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forbidden except with due right. That means illa bil haqq, like if it is for qisas or because of a penalty. Consuming a riba, wrongfully devouring the wealth of an orphan, freeing from the battlefield, and accusing chaste, believing, and unsuspecting women of immorality. So those are 7 of the 9 that I mentioned. Now, this very same narration here that Imam Bukhari is quoting in Adab al-Mufrad, here Imam Bukhari is quoting 9 major sins, isn't it? Alama Abdul Razzaq, he quoted it, and it goes, it's the exact same incident, but he quoted that Ibn Umar radiyallahu anhu only mentioned 7 or 8. So, and yesterday I told you about Alama Abdul Razzaq. Imam Bukhari regretted not meeting him. So he's a very great scholar, and he quoted in his Musannaf in volume 10 on page 75 this very same narration, that the person came and said, "Inni kuntu akuna ma'an najidat وقال أصبت ذنوبا وأحب أن تعد علي الكبائر." قال فعد عليه 7 أو 8. So can you see it's mentioned only 7 or 8 major sins, whereas in this narration 9 are mentioned. So from these narrations, a person could assume that probably the major sins, the kaba'ir, are only 7. However, when someone asked Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu that is it really such that the kaba'ir are only 7 sins? So a person came and asked him, "Al-kaba'ir sab'un," that are the only 7 sins that are considered to be major sins. Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu responded and said, and this is quoted with a very authentic sanad. Alama Abdul Razzaq quotes عن معمر عن ابن الطاووس عن أبيه قيل لابن عباس الكبائر 7 قال هي إلى 70 أقرب, that they are actually 70, closer to 70. So can you see how drastically it differs, how the numbers are so different? Abu Talib al-Makki, he mentioned 17. So the 17 are also quoted, Manana Ilyas, here in his edition of Adab al-Mufrad in Adad ibn Kathir edition. He quoted from Abu Talib al-Makki those 17. So must I mention the 17? Are you interested in knowing what he considered as 17 major sins, or do you want to do voluntary homework and go and read it up yourself? It's there on page 57, 58 of the Dar ibn Kathir print. Okay, so you all want me to say it. So okay, Abu Talib al-Makki, so we go back to the original source. And we go there. He said, وَالَّذِي عِنْدِي فِي جُمْلَةِ ذَلِكَ مُجْتَمَعًا مِنَ الْمُتَفَرِّقِ 17. That there are 17. So I'm just going to say it in English because then you can read the Arabic. So he mentions that in total there are 17. So 4 are related to the heart. What are the 4 which are related to the heart? The first is associating partners with Allah. The second is persisting in disobedience. So now to come and say that smoking, it's makruh tanzihi. I'm not discussing the mas'ala here, the differences. But even if you consider it to be a minor sin, by persisting in a minor sin, it becomes a major sin. The third is despairing in the mercy of Allah. Can you see that when a person loses hope in the mercy of Allah, then that is also considered as a major sin. And the fourth is that a person feels secure from the punishment of Allah. So those are 4 major sins that are related to the heart. Then there are 4 major sins that are related to the tongue. So the first is giving false testimony, that you didn't see this person stealing. You go to the court and say that he stole, and now they have to cut off his hand. The second is qadful muhsin. You accuse a chaste, free Muslim adult of fornication. Then the next is al-yaminul ghamus. So taking a false oath. What's the meaning of a false oath? So it's either that which nullifies a rightful claim, or it is affirms a falsehood. And others says that a false oath is that which unjustly seizes another Muslim's wealth, even if it be so small as a miswak. So if you give an oath and another person loses his wealth because of that, that is called al-yaminul ghamus. And why is it called ghamus? So the literal meaning of ghamus is to immerse. So the reason why it's called ghamus, because لأنها تغمسه في غضب الله. It immerses that person into the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, لأنها تغمس صاحبها في النار. It plunges its perpetrator into the fire of Jahannam. So if you take an oath and you say that this is the person wrote this in his will, meantime that person did not write that in his will, and now the estate is being divided differently, can you see it's considered as a major sin. Then the next is a sihr, and then he explains what sihr. Then he explains that 3 are related to the stomach. So what are 3 major sins that are related to the stomach? It is drinking intoxicants. So any kind of a thing that intoxicates. So getting intoxicated by any drink, and then consuming the wealth of an orphan unjustly, or consuming riba. So those are 3 major sins of the stomach. And then wathnani fil farj, 2 are related to the private parts, fornication, and engaging in the action of the people of Lut, meaning sodomy. And then 2 are with regards to the hands, meaning committing murder or committing theft. And then the final is with regards to the legs. It means fleeing from the battlefield. So can you see those are 17? And then after that, and this is why I wanted to mention it, because you can see each one is related to a specific limb: tongue, hands, legs, heart. But then وَوَاحِدَةٌ فِي جَمِيعِ الْجَسَدِ, there is one sin that involves the entire body. And what is that one and only sin that involves the entire body? It is uququl walidain. It is disobedience to a person's parents. So those are 17. Then Alama Badruddin Aini rahimahullah in Umdatul Qari. So if you want to, you can go read. Some of you all said that you will read. You want homework, so here's the homework. You can go to Umdatul Qari, and you can go see there in volume 22 on page 84. He takes the different narrations and then he adds them up, adds them up, adds them up, and coming to trying to get to the total number. After doing all of that, so for those of you who want to do homework, you can go do that homework. Then he says, وقال شيخنا زين الدين اجتمع من مجموع هذه الأحاديث المرفوعة والموقوفة نحو 40 من الكبائر. That There are 40. If you go through all just the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you will find 40 sins which are considered as major sins. And then he listed them. So a few is that idda'a'u ar-rajul ila ghayri abihi. So I gave you the reference. It's in Umdatul Qari. So you know it's Umdatul Qari. It's the commentary of Sahih al-Bukhari by Alama Badruddin Aini, volume 22, page 84. So not volume 20, volume 22. So now he mentions, so just so that you can see that some of these sins, we don't even consider them to be major sins. So for example, the first is, he says, idda'a'u ar-rajul ila ghayri abihi. A person, he calls someone else his father, not his real father. So that's the first. The second, ira'atu aynayhi, deception with one's eyes. What's the meaning of deception with one's eyes? That means if you secretly signal to another person, or you look in illicit glance at the opposite gender, or looking in the house of someone else without their permission, wal israr ala saghira, persisting in a minor sin, wal intifa min walad lahu, denying that a child is your child. You know that this child is your child, but now you don't want to bring up the child, so then you say it's not your child. Buhtul mu'min, slandering a mu'min, wal haqq, harboring malice, wal zina, committing fornication, saraqa, stealing, si'aya, ببريء إلى ذي سلطان فيقتله, taking, falsely accusing an innocent person and taking him to a person of authority, and because of that they execute him. والغلول, stealing from the spoils of war. والغيبة, so backbiting. واللواطة, sodomy. Now this is a major one. This is a very major sin, this one. وَنِسْيَانِ سُورَةٍ أَوْ آيَةٍ مِّنَ الْقُرْآنِ, forgetting a surah or a verse of the Quran. So you see, forgetting a surah or a verse of the Quran is also considered as a major sin. So you know, my daughters, they came home from madrasa, they're saying that one appa in the madrasa is saying that in Ramadan it's more important to learn your door than to make a khatam. So they're asking me if it's correct or not. So I said that yes, because forgetting what you forgot, it's a major sin. And making a khatam, it's Sunnah. So, and you're still spending time with the Quran. So, if a person learned the Quran and they forgot a surah or they forgot a verse of the Quran, that is considered as a major sin. And then, namima, tail bearing, carrying tales. Thereafter, he says that Alama Rafi'i, rahmallah, he quoted from a group of scholars that they also considered a major sin, ghasbul mal. So that means where a person usurps wealth of another person. And another person, then he quotes, وحكى عن صاحب العدة أنه أضاف إليها الإفطار في رمضان بلا عذر. So deliberately breaking the fast in Ramadan without a valid excuse, that's also a major sin. Then والخيانة في كيل أو وزن, the dishonesty in measuring or in weighing, that's also a major sin. وتقديم الصلاة عن وقتها, performing salah before its appropriate time, that's also a major sin. وضرب مسلم بلا حق, hitting a Muslim unjustly. وسب الصحابة, reviling and speaking ill of the Sahaba. وأخذ الرشوة, taking and accepting bribes. والدياثة, so pumping. والقيادة من الرجل والمرأة, facilitating immorality, whether it's a male or whether it's a female, that's major sins. Then وترك الأمر بالمعروف والنهي عن المنكر, abandoning, enjoining good and forbidding evil. When one has ma'al qudra, if one has the ability to command good and forbid evil and he doesn't do it. So this is super important, because if you hold some kind of authority, if you are a parent or if you are a teacher and you don't enjoin good, you can see the children are all disrespecting the Quran, or the children are not, or you can see that those who are now 13, 14 years old, they are not wearing a niqab, the 13, 14-year-old girls in the madrasa. Then you have to make nahi anil munkar. So otherwise it's a major sin. So you're going to madrasa every day and teaching, but imagine going to madrasa and teaching and getting sin for it. That outwardly it seems like you're doing such a great act of worship. that you are teaching, but you're going there, and because you're not making nahi anil munkar, you are getting sin. وإحراق الحيوان, burning an animal alive. وامتناع المرأة من زوجها بلا سبب, a wife's refusal to fulfill her husband's rights without a valid excuse. And then at the last, والوقيعة في أهل العلم وحملة القرآن. So this here is so important that it's a major sin to slander scholars and the bearers of the Quran, the Huffaz. So, you know, now because in today's times, that I don't know if in your countries, but in South Africa, there's so much differences amongst the scholars and so much jealousy. And if you keep contact with the different groups of ulama, you will realize how many lies is spoken there, and how many slandering there is, and how many things which are not true. So it's best rather, if you see anything, you know that the flesh of ulama, it's poisonous. Alama ibn Asakir rahmallah said that when you make a ghiba of another person in the Quran, it comes ayuhibbu ahadukum ay ya'kula lahma akhihi maytan fakarihtumuh, that would you like to eat the dead flesh of another person? But when it comes to an alim, then his flesh is poisonous. If you're going to eat dead flesh, you're poisoning your iman. And when something gets poisoned, it dies. It means you are you know, the ulama say that a person who speaks unjustly of four ulama, there is fear that if you dig his grave, you'll find that his face is turned away from the qibla. So it's such a great sin. And the bearers of the Quran, the Huffaz. Now, generally, Huffaz, maybe a Hafiz is a young person. And then, you know, you go around in many localities, they go with blanket statements. Yeah, the Huffaz are the ones who are taking drugs. But meantime, it's not all the Huffaz. Now, the Huffaz are those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose, and it just pass a blanket statement like that. That person is a Hafiz of the Quran, yet look at how he behaves. So, slandering a Hafiz, even if he's a young, that is considered as a major sin. And then he mentions others also, eating pork and eating carrion without necessity. And Imam Shafi'i rahmallah mentioned that having intercourse during menstruation, that's also a major sin. So you can see, so sorry, we went into lots of major sins, but the whole objective of mentioning all of these major sins is that now the question arises, how do we reconcile between all of these seemingly contradictory narrations that are listing different numbers? So are the major sins 7, or are they 9, or are they, how many major sins are there? What about this particular narration which is mentioning 9? And then that's similar to the question which was posted on the group, and that is why I said we'll answer it here. So the answer is, whoever mentioned an amount of, like in this narration, Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu is mentioning 9, but from other reports it's mentioned that he said 7. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu quoted 7. So their objective was simply to list some of the major sins. It was not to confine it. So if you say that 4 fingers, it doesn't mean that a person only has 4 fingers on his hand. It means that he's only he only raised 4 fingers. So that does not mean that he doesn't have 5 fingers on his one hand. So this here is what Alama Nasiruddin Baydawi rahmallah, he condensed the statement of Alamatu Bashti, and he said, وَلَيْسَ لِقَائِلٍ أَن يَقُولَ, a person cannot object and say, كيف عد الكبائر ها هنا 3 و4 في حديث ابن عمر وأنس و7 في حديث Abi Hurairah, that why are the major sins counted as 3 in this narration? So because he mentioned it when they were talking about another narration where 3 major sins were mentioned, and then there's 4 mentioned in another narration of Ibn Umar also, and of Anas radiallahu anhu. And then the 7 mentioned in the hadith of Abu Hurairah. So he says, لأنه عليه السلام لم يتعرض للحصر في شيء من ذلك. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not intend to enumerate them exhaustively in any of these narrations. He didn't intend to list each and every single major sin and number it. ولم يعرب بكلامه, and nor does his speech indicate exclusivity. أما في هذا الحديث, and he mentions about that hadith, it's apparent. وأما في حديث ابن عمر فلأن الحكم فيه مطلق والمطلق لا يفيد الحصر. So they're mentioning it in an unrestricted manner. So he's just mentioning that you have 9 sins. Maybe it could be meaning that these are the 9 most common sins, which are a kaba'ir, but they're so common, yet they are major sins. Or it could mean that these are the 9 known sins, that everybody knows that these 9 sins are definitely kaba'ir, although there are other sins which people do not consider as kaba'ir. So that's the answer. So, what's the answer? The answer is that the fact that they are mentioning a particular number does not negate that other numbers could be mentioned. So now that question on the group. So in response, like you get all of these hadith also and in statements of Sahaba radiallahu anhum. So answer number one is that relative severity, that some sins are maybe more serious than others. So they're only mentioning that which is in the highest bracket, that which is are the most severe of all sins. They're not mentioning all the kaba'ir. That's the first. The second is the legal consequences. So maybe some kaba'ir have worldly consequences. For example, there'll be had on the person. If he kills another person, then he will have to be taken and a penalty will have to be that either he will have to pay blood money, either he himself will be killed. So that's another. The third is emphasis. Maybe the Prophet ﷺ wanted to emphasize that these are the most major sins. And the next is context. Maybe in that particular context. So, for example, Shu'aib alayhi salam, that he said, "Awful kayla wal mikyal." So the Quran quotes him advising his people in a particular thing. But it does not mean that that's the one and only sin that the people in his community perpetrated. Rather, they may have been perpetrating other sins as well, but that was the most common sin that they were perpetrating, and that is why the Quran made a specific mention about that. But nevertheless, so in response to that question on the group, according to the vast majority of scholars, there is a saghair as well which contrasts kaba'ir, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned الَّذِينَ يَجْتَنِبُونَ كَبَائِرَ الْإِثْمِ وَالْفَوَاحِشَ إِلَّا اللَّمَمْ. So how's your door now, Ramadan? Anyone know quickly where that ayat comes? Verse number 32 of Surah Najm. So those who stay away from major sins and from immorality, illa lamam. Then the commentators, they explained what is lamam. For example, Hassan rahmallahi explained al-lamam al-khatara min az-zina. They're just fantasizing of fornication. Like a person doesn't have the guts to go and fornicate. Or person doesn't have money to go and sleep with an immoral lady, but he has the thought, he has that fantasizing. So that is what is considered as a lamam. So you can see what they're considering as minor sins, like just thoughts, not actually in action. Nevertheless, coming now, we're not going to explain all the 9 points here of this particular narration, but just the one point of so a random point. So yeah, about shirk. So what is shirk? Alama ibn Daqiq al-Eid, he said that when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or when Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, when he mentioning about shirk, then يحتمل أن يراد به مطلق الكفر. It could mean that it's referring to all kinds of kufr. So not necessarily shirk. Shirk means associating partners with Allah. But maybe a person, he believes that there's one deity, like the Ahl Kitab, they believe there's one deity, but then they still have kufr. So it refers, although shirk is being mentioned, but it refers to all kinds of kufr. So then why not just mention kufr? Why mention shirk? فيكون تخصيصه بالذكر لغلبته في الوجود لا سيما في بلاد العرب. Because in that time, in the Arabian places, they were mostly polytheists. So the Romans, they were the Christians, and so those who were in the Arabian Peninsula, those who the Muslims were meeting on a daily basis, were polytheists. فذكر تنبيها على غيره. So therefore it was mentioned specifically shirk, but it actually refers to all kinds of kufr. ويحتمل أن يراد به خصوصه, or maybe it really does mean shirk. So it's like trying to emphasize that إلا أنه يرد على هذا الإحماد أنه قد يظهر أن بعض الكفر أعظم قبحا من الإشراك وهو كفر التعطيل. But then an objection will come on this, that there's some kind of kufr which is even worse than associating partners with Allah, and that is kufr al-ta'atil. So ta'atil means that you deny that there is a Lord, like the atheist. That's worse than associating partners with Allah. Because if a person associates partners with Allah, then he's still at least believing that there is a deity. Yes, he believes that a deity has partners, but he believes that there is a deity. Whereas if a person does not believe in any deity, then that is even worse, because now he's not believing in any deity at all. So therefore he says that the first meaning is more appropriate. So this here he mentions in Ihkam al-Ahkam in volume 2 on page 274. So that's the one. And now just to mention on the reason why Imam Bukhari rahmallah is quoting this here. So it's about Uquq al-Walidain and about disrespect to parents. Alama ibn Daqiq al-Eid in the same kitab he explained Uquq al-Walidain ma'dudun min akbar al-kabair. It's considered as the most severe, the gravest form of major sins. So it's put right next to shirk. ولا شك في عظم مفسرته لعظم حق الوالدين. There is no doubt about how severe it is given the immense rights of parents. So that is why it's mentioned together with shirk. So inshallah you can recite the next narration. Sheikh Idris is here or Muftī Yusuf. تفضل.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وبه قال حدثنا أبو نعيم قال حدثنا سفيان عن هشام بن عروة عن أبيه واخفض لهما جناح الذل من الرحمة قال لا تمتنع من شيء أحباه.
Hisham ibn Urwa, he quotes from his father Urwa ibn Zubair that he said with regards to this verse of the Quran, verse number 24 of Surah Isra. So Surah Isra is the 17th Surah, verse number 24. وَخْفِضْ لَهُمَا جَنَاحَ الذُّلِّ مِنَ الرَّحْمَةِ. The literal meaning of the verse is lower to them the wing of humility out of mercy. So what does that mean? He explained it, the senior tabi'i. The students of the Muwatta know about Urwa because we spoke about him in detail right in the beginning of the Muwatta. He's one of the most authentic narrators from Aisha radiyallahu anha, because he was brought up together with Aisha radiyallahu anha. So لا تمتنع من شيء أحباه, that sorry, not brought up together, brought up in the house of Aisha radiyallahu anha. So this great and senior tabi'i, he says that what's the meaning of this verse? لا تمتنع من شيء أحباه. Do not withhold anything that they love. So other famous authors who quoted it, Alama Tabari rahmallah, he quoted it in his tafsir. Hanad ibn Sari quoted it in his kitab al-Zuhd. Hussein al-Marwazi, he quoted it in his kitab al-Bir was-Silah, and others also quoted it. It's an authentic narration. Malana Ilyas Barabankwi, he said, Hadithun Sahihul Isnad on page number 62 of his edition. So now a brief explanation here. I'm saying brief, but it's still taking so long. Make dua Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts barakah in our time. So what's the meaning of janah? So Alama Muhammad Tahir Patni. In Arabic they call him Fatani, and some say that you must pronounce it as Fatani, but if you know Hindi, Urdu, then it's Patni. Do any of you know him? Have any of you heard about the scholar? So do you know from where he was, where exactly he was? Yes, mashallah. So he was from Gujarat, and he passed away in the lunar year 986, so around 460 years ago. So it shows that there was ilm in Gujarat at that time. So he explains Al-Junuh. He wrote a kitab Majma' Bihar al-Anwar. So in volume 1 on page 400, he explains Al-Junuh al-Mail وجناح الإنسان عضده هو إبطه. The جنوح, it means inclining or leaning towards something. That's the literal meaning of the word junuh. So janahul insan, it refers to the upper arm or the armpit. وَخْفِضْ جَنَاحَكَ. So when they say وَخْفِضْ جَنَاحَكَ, then it means to show leniency. And وَعَصَى الْإِنسَانِ جَنَاحَهُ. Likewise, the staff of a human being, of a person, is also called a janah. So, in the Quran, I don't need to see your dot. وَضْمُمْ إِلَيْكَ جَنَاحَكَ مِنَ الرَّهْبِ. So do you know in which surah that comes? أسلك يدك في جيبك تخرج بيضاء من غير سوء واضمم إليك جناحك من الرهب فذلك برهانان من ربك إلى فرعون وملئه. Ya subhanallah. So verse number 32 of Surah Al-Qasas. Allah zid fazid. So yeah, it means it's referring to the staff. So basically, it's a metaphorical way of saying that a person should be extremely humble to his parents. So that is the literal meaning, that be very humble with mercy to your parents. Allama Fakhruddin Razi, in his tafsir, so his tafsir, it's either called Tafsir al-Razi, or it's called Mafatih al-Ghayb, or it's called Tafsir al-Kabir. It has all of these different names. So he mentioned, وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ الطَّائِرَ إذا أراد أن ينحط للوقوع كسر جناحه وخفضه. That a bird, when it intends to descend, when it wants to come back to the ground, it lowers and it folds its wing. So this is how it comes down. It's lowering its wings. وإذا أراد أن ينهض للطيران رفع جناحه. So when it wants to ascend, when it wants to fly, when it wants to go up, when it wants to take flight, then it raises its wings. So you can see that coming down, it lowers its wings. So that is how in Arabic, فجعل خفض جناحه عند الانحطاط مثلا في التواضع ولين الجانب. So that is how in Arabic they made this a metaphor. They made it a way of saying that when a person brings himself down, that you're the great Hazrat of your place, you're the Allamatul Zahar, the Muhaqqiqul Zaman, or you're a very senior doctor, or you're a high level accountant, or very, very great position, you're a CEO of multiple companies, but you bring yourself down in front of your parents. Now, maybe your parents didn't even go to school, but you bring yourself and you lower yourself and you humble yourself before your parents. So because you're lowering yourself, so and a bird, when it wants to come down, it lowers its wings. So that is why in the verse of the Quran it's saying that lower your wings. So that is the literal meaning of verse number 24 of Surah Al-Isra. Now, in this narration, the great Tabi'i, he is explaining that how do you show this kind of humility in front of your parents. That is saying you must lower yourself like this before your parents. So he says, لا تمتنع من شيء أحبه. That whatever they want, just agree with them. Let it be like how they want. So it's basically all based on compromising fully and totally. That means you have brought yourself down. That you want this, they want that. You give preference to what they want. You don't give. Now you say that they from the 90s. What do they know? Not even the day from the previous millennium. What do they know? They don't know anything about modern technology. No, you just give them whatever they want. Make them happy. That as long as they are happy, you are happy. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is happy. So Alama Tabari rahmallah, he explained in his tafsir, in Tafsir al-Tabari in volume 17 on page 418, وَكُنْ لَهُمَا ذَلِيلًا رَحْمَةً مِنْكَ بِهِمَا تُطِيعُهُمَا فِيمَا أَمَرَاكَ بِهِ مِمَّا لَمْ يَكُنْ لِلَّهِ مَعْصِيَةً وَلَا تُخَالِفْهُمَا فِيمَا أَحَبَّهُ. That this is the meaning of this verse, that you humble yourself before them out of mercy. You obey them in anything as long as it does not result in disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then you don't oppose them in what they love. And then he quoted this very same statement of Urwa rahmallah with multiple chains. So he says, وَبِنَحْوِ الَّذِي قُلْنَا فِي ذَلِكَ قَالَ أَهْلُ التَّأْوِيلِ. And then he quoted this very same narration. Similarly, Imam Mujahid rahmallah, he presented the same commentary and he said, يطيعهما فيما أمراه ولا يمتنع من شيء أراداه. That you obey them in whatever they want, and ولا يمتنع من شيء أراداه. If they want something, now they said, okay, let's have lunch uh, at 3 p.m. and you want to say you want lunch at 1:30. It's okay, now I'll just compromise. Okay, we'll have lunch with them at 3 p.m. They say, let's go here, you want to go there. You say, okay, let's just have it like that. Now, Eid, they say, okay, Eid lunch we'll have here. You want to have it somewhere else. You just give in. So that is what is meant by this verse. The greatest commentators of this ummah, that is how they are explaining this verse. And it does not matter whether a person's parents are kafirs or are sinners or even kafirs. In Mawsu'atul Fiqhiyatil Kuwaitiyah, it's mentioned, وَمِنَ الْوَاجِبِ عَلَى الْمُسْلِمِ بِرُّ الْوَالِدَيْنِ وَإِنْ كَانَا فَاسِقَيْنِ أَوْ كَافِرَيْنِ. So this here is in volume 6 on page 258 of Mawsu'at al-Fiqhiyat al-Kuwaitiyah. That it is wajib, it is compulsory upon a Muslim to obey his parents and to be kind to his parents, even though they are fasiqs. So a person didn't have a choice who can be his parent. Did any of you have a choice? Did you go before you were born, go tell Allah Ta'ala that I want to be born in the house of that sheikh? I want to be the son, I want to be the daughter of that pious person. No one had the choice, isn't it? That Allah Ta'ala is the one who chose who's going to be your parents. And the same then even applies to asatida. That Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala chose who is going to be our asatida. That a person could be loving, and it happens so often that he's loving a few kilometers away from a Darul Ulum. Yet he travels to a completely different country to go and study. Why? Because Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala has chose those to be his asatida. So they say your parents and your asatida, those are divinely chosen by Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. So even if they become fasiqs, you know, the Abdullah Andalusi, the whole incident, how Alama Shibli still remained loyal to him, even though he became a murtad and he started to look after pigs because he wanted to marry that Christian girl. So, but he felt that this here is my sheikh, this is my ustad. So he still remained loyal, constantly making dua for him, etc. So even if a person's father could be a drug addict. A person's father could be immersed in interest in riba. A person's father could be doing the most vile sins. But then too, it is obligatory upon him. It is his duty to to respect his father, to be kind to his father. And then, of course, he needs to make dua for his father. That is the greatest khidmah, isn't it? That if a person's father is a sinner and you are making dua, oh Allah, forgive my father, oh Allah, take my father out of the sin, then isn't that the greatest khidmah you can ever do? Because we understand khidmah, okay, go and buy the groceries for your parents. That will benefit them for that day. Okay, pay the monthly lights and water and whatever bills they have. That will benefit them for the month. But when you benefit them in this way, you are benefiting them for, in this dunya also and in the year after also. So it's compulsory to obey one's parents, to be kind to one's parents, even if they are fasiqs and even if they are kafirs. وَيَجِبُ طَاعَتُهُمَا فِي غَيْرِ مَعْصِيَةِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. It is compulsory to obey them in anything else, as long as it does not result in the disobedience of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. You can read the next narration, inshallah.
باب جزاء الوالدين. وبه قال حدثنا قبيصة قال حدثنا سفيان عن سهيل بن أبي صالح عن أبيه عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لا يجزي ولد والده إلا أن يجده مملوكا فيشتريه فيعتقه.
Jazakallah khairan, barakallah fiqh. So Suhail ibn Abi Salih, he reported from his father that Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu quoted from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he said, a child can never repay his father except in one instance. So a child can never repay his father for any good that his father done to him. He can never repay his father except in one instance, and that is if he finds his father to be a slave and then he purchases his father, and then he frees his father. So that's the only if he does that, then you can say he recompenses his father. If he doesn't find his father as a slave, no matter what other good he does, he can never recompense his father. He can be serving his father for 30 years of his life, for 40 years, for 50 years of his life, but you cannot say. So maybe his father looked after him until the age of 15, and from the age of 15 right up until the age of 75, he's looking after his father. So who looked after who for a longer duration? Did he look after his father for a longer duration? Or, yes, so spouses are also divinely chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, if I'm going into the discussion about spouses and explain to you how it's divinely, it's going to become too long. But inshallah, when we come to those chapters, for now, you can just understand that yes, even spouses are divinely chosen. And you can understand that you didn't know this person from a bar of blue soap. And he's living in a completely different part of the world, and how you got married, a different part of the country, different part. How did you cross paths? Who told you about him, etc. So a person can now in today's times is there slavery in any of your countries? Do they still have slavery or they don't have slavery? In whose country there's slavery? So there's no slavery, isn't? So if there's no slavery, in today's times, it's impossible for you to repay your father. So, and that's what I was telling you now, that if the father looked after the child until 15, and if the child looked after the father from 15 till 85, so so many so much more the child looked after the father, but the child cannot recompense the father. He cannot repay the father. So this narration, Imam Ahmad rahmallah quoted it a few times in his Musnad. Imam Muslim rahmallah quoted it in his Sahih. Imam Abu Dawud rahmallah quoted it. Imam Tirmidhi rahmallah quoted it. And Imam Ibn Majah rahmallah quoted it. So if Imam Muslim rahmallah quoted it, you can already guess it is an authentic narration. So Imam Nawawi rahmallah, because now Imam Muslim quoted it, so the commentary of Imam Nawawi on Sahih Muslim, so it's in volume 10 on page 153, he explained how you pronounce the first words. بفتح أوله, so it must be pronounced as يجزي, so not يجزي. So and what's the meaning? لا يكافئه بإحسانه وقضاء حقه إلا أن يعتقه. That a child can never recompense his father by showing kindness to him or by fulfilling his duties unless he gets him as a slave and he frees him. In الدر المنضد it is mentioned لا يجزي بفتح حرف المضارع, it's فتحة the مضارع words, أي لا يكافئ ولد بإحسانه على ولده وقضاء ما عليه من حقه. So علما ابن هبيرة he remarked بهذا الحديث من الفقه أن جزاء الولد للوالد بقدر استحقاقه غير متصور. That this narration demonstrates a key fiqhi principle that a child's full recompense for a parent's rights is something that's inconceivable. It's not even something that you can perceive with your intellect, that a child can make up to his parents. So وإنما صور النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم سورة نادرة الوقوع. So the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم is giving an exceptional and rare scenario. And what's that rare scenario? Is that the child will find his father enslaved and then purchase him and sets him free. So that's very, very rare, because generally if a person's father was a slave, he would be born in a slave home, isn't it? So he himself would be a slave. So for a person to be free and then to be wealthy enough to be able to purchase his own father, it's like something which is super rare. So that means that the Prophet ﷺ is giving this example ليدل على غزارة فضل الوالدين على أنه اشتراه عتق من غير أن يعتق. It's just to emphasize and to show you the immense virtues of one's parents. Then this last portion, what he says here, there's a fiqh principle which is derived from it. So must I mention now the fiqh. So the fiqh ruling very briefly is that a son cannot own his father. The minute a son purchases his father, just say if there are slavery today, or in the time of slavery when there was slavery, if a son had to go and buy his father, the minute he buys his father, automatically his father is immediately freed. He cannot own his father. So no one can own their father. The purchase is like automatically it makes the father become free. It automatically results in emancipation without any additional requirement, without any formal declaration. He doesn't have to say that I'm freeing my father. So Allama Baghawi rahmallah said, وَقَوْلُهُ فَيُعْتِقَهُ لم يرد به أن إنشاء الإعتاق شرط. Does not mean that the son must now buy the father, then the father comes in his possession, and now he must then set the father free. But what the meaning of this narration is that he purchases his father so that his father can become free. Can you understand? That he purchases his father so that his father can become free. بل أراد به أن الشراء يخلصه عن الرق. That purchasing his father automatically makes his father free. So do you understand that point? So that's the fiqh principle, that by purchasing your father automatically. Alama Uthman al-Zayla'i in Tabyin al-Haqaiq, to quote just from one Hanafi kitab, he said, لأن شراء القريب إعتاق. That just by purchasing a relative, it immediately results in emancipation. That you don't have to then set him free, and nor can you own him. You can't go purchase your father and then say, hey, now you're my slave, come carry the Stella house for me. No, the minute you purchased him, he can tell you, I'm free now, I'm your father, and you must do this. So the minute you purchase a relative, they automatically become free. Allama Baghawi rahmallah, he said, وَالْعَمَلْ عَلَى هَذَا عِنْدَ أَهْلِ الْعِلْم. That all the scholars, they agree on this point here. That إذا اشترى الرجل أحدا من آبائه أو أمهاته أو واحدا من أولاده أو أولاد أولاده أو ملكه بسبب آخر يعتق عليه من غير أن ينشئ فيه عتقا. That this is the view of all scholars, this consensus among scholars. If a man purchases one of his parents, his mother or his father, or one of his children or any of his descendants, or acquires ownership through any other means, then the person is immediately emancipated without the need for a separate declaration of freedom. It's only the Zahiris who differed with this here. Allama Mudhiri rahmallah in al-Mafatih, he said, وَذَهَبَ أَهْلُ الظَّاهِرِ وَبَعْضُ الْمُتَكَلِّمِينَ إِلَىٰ أَنَّ الْأَبْ لَا يُعْتَقُ عَلَى الْإِبْنِ. They saying that no, the father will not automatically be freed. They use this particular narration. Allama Tibi rahmallah, he then went into the explain this here. So I'm going to read all of your questions now towards the end. Also, with regards to questions, you also on the group that link. So subhanAllah, you know, now I didn't go and count, but if I have to say, there's like, must be at least 20, 25, even more private messages that you send to me. So I would have loved to answer all of your private messages on my WhatsApp, but now there's no barakah in my time. So unfortunately, I can't. I'll select a few here and there what I can manage to answer, but it's difficult for me to answer all private messages. So if you can, rather send it on that link, inshallah. So if you send your questions on that link, then inshallah, if they send it to me, then definitely, inshallah, I'll answer it. But if you message me privately, there's chances that I might not even see your message, because now so many people are messaging private messages. So then I don't get a chance to see all of those messages. So nevertheless, so the Zahir is, so the Ahlul Zahir, it's they are basically those who just take the literal meaning of Quran and Hadith, everything on the literal meaning. So it's like considered as a madhab, and the main imam who they follow is Dawud Zahiri, Ibn Hazm al-Zahiri. So you can read up about them. The Salafis of today, like, you know, the Ghair Muqallidin, a lot, they resemble the Ahlul Zawahir. And inshallah, that's a subject for a whole different discussion, because no, not Quranics. They also, you can see they follow hadith. They're using this hadith as a proof to show that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is saying that you must buy and then set him free. So they're using that as a proof to say that you can own your father. But everyone else is saying that no, this narration is mean by purchasing your father, you set him free. So then Allama Tibi rahmallah, he went and then he said that now you're getting involved in all these fiqhi issues, and then discussing about zahiris and going into so much intricacies. Forget all of that. The point of this narration is not that. So this is what Allama Tibi is saying, that the point of this narration So he says, وَهَذَا وَأَمْثَالُ مِمَّا لَا يَشْفِي الْغَلِيلِ, that even if you're going to use this particular narration, there's going to be other objections which can come about. So leave all of that. Rather focus on the objective of this narration. And what is the objective of this narration? وَالْحَدِيثُ مِنْ بَابِ التَّعْلِيقِ بِالْمَحَالِ لِلْمُبَالَغَةِ. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is trying to put something which is impossible. He's suspending it upon something which is impossible. Like you tell a person, I'll give you $2 million the day the sun rises purple in color. So on which date will you give him the $2 million? Will it be in 5 years' time or in 10 years' time? Do any of you know when the sun is going to rise purple? So you're basing it on something that is not going to happen, isn't it? So it means that I'm not going to give you $2 million. That's what you're trying to say. Like the day, like just say your son come ask you for something, you say the day cold drink rains from the sky, the day money grows on the tree, that's the day I'll give you. So you are suspending it on something that's impossible, showing that it's never going to happen. So that's the objective of this hadith, that you can never own your father. So if you can never own your father, it shows that you can never ever repay your father. You understand? So it's not like a literal thing that you must just say if it had to happen such that a person's father was a slave, then if he had to go and buy the father, and then that now answers your question about deaths. This year, it's the whole objective here is trying to the Prophet ﷺ is trying to show that there's no way you can ever recompense your father. That is what the meaning of this narration is. لا يجزي ولد والده إلا يملكه فيعتقه وهو محال. This year it's impossible. You cannot own your father. So if you cannot own your father, if the sun is not going to rise purple in color, if cold drink is not going to rain from the sky, if money is not going to grow from the trees, that means you are never ever in your life going to be able to ever pay your father. Even if your father was a slave, if you had to go and buy him, he would have automatically become free. That means you could have never owned him. Because the minute you paid the person, just say your father was a slave and they were selling him for $100,000. So now you gathered all this money, and now you went to go buy him. In today's times, may Allah Ta'ala protect us. Here in South Africa, it's happening a lot. Make dua for Allah Ta'ala to protect us all, inshallah, our families. That if, just say they kidnap your father and now they're asking for ransom. So you went and you gathered all this money and you went and you go give it. Even then, so in the example of the hadith, even if you had to purchase your father, you would not be able to own him, because the minute you paid, immediately he was set free. He would not come in your ownership. So like how there is no way for him to come in your ownership, that is how there is no way that you can ever repay your father. And then he gives examples to show and prove that this is the point. So you understand the whole point of this narration, that this narration mustn't be taken literally, but rather it's just to illustrate that you can never recompense your father. You can never repay your father. Even it's like impossible to repay your father. So that is what is the whole objective of this narration. Then also they use the same narration for a whole nother fiqh issue, and that is ownership transfers immediately to a person when he buys it. Because if the father becomes free, the minute you do the purchase, so the minute you do the EFT, now in that time there's no EFT, there's no transfers, but just giving you an example. So Alama Jassas Razi in his Sharh Mukhtasar al-Tahawi, he mentions this. This is just to show you how the fuqaha would take out points from all kinds of narrations. So yeah, he said, from this very narration, he said, فَأَزَالَ مِلْكُ الْبَيْعِ عَنِ الثَّمَرَ وَالْمَالِ بِنَفْسِ الْعَقْدِ. They just say a person bought some fruits from you. Then the minute he paid you, even if he didn't take possession, so yes, he will only get rights over it once he takes possession. But the minute he paid you, now you lose ownership of that. Now you can't go and take it and go say, okay, I'm going to give sadaqah. It's the month of Ramadan, and the Prophet ﷺ comes right in the beginning of Sahih Bukhari that he was most generous in the month of Ramadan. I want to practice on this, so let me go give all this food, and then I'll give it for iftar also, and I'll get the rewards of everybody's fast. No, the minute the person pays you something, you lose ownership of that. So ownership is transferred immediately and without any condition. And this is when there is no stipulation of a khiyar. So the seller, he loses ownership the minute he sells an item. You can see that kind of a point they deduce from this kind of a narration. So this here is in Sharh Mukhtasar al-Tahawi. أفعل ما جصاص volume 3 page 7 فأزال ملك البيع عن الثمرة والمال بنفس العقد وأوجبه للمشتري ولو كان للبيع خيار ما استحق عليه ذلك بالعقد ويدل عليه أيضا قول النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يجزي ولد والده إلا يجره مملوكا فيشتره فيعتقه فعتقه عليه بنفس الشراء من غير شرط افتراق فدل على انتفاء الخيار. So from from this narration, that's how they deduced that ruling. But like Al-Matibi said, that this whole objective of this narration is not to show a fiqh ruling, rather it was to demonstrate and to prove that you can never ever own your father. You can read the next narration, inshallah.
وبه قال حدثنا آدم قال حدثنا شعبة قال حدثنا سعيد بن أبي بردة قال سمعت أبي يحدث أنه شهد ابن عمر ورجل يماني يطوف بالبيت حمل أمه وراء ظهره يقول إني لها بعيرها المذلل إن أزعرت ركابها لم أزعر ثم قال يا ابن عمر أتراني جزيتها قال لا ولا بزفرة واحدة ثم طاف ابن عمر فأتى المقام فصلى ركعتين ثم قال يا ابن أبي موسى إن كل ركعتين تكفران ما أمامهما.
Jazakallah khairan, barakallah fiqh. So Sa'id ibn Abi Burda, he narrated that I heard my father relate that he witnessed Ibn Umar radiallahu anh, a person from Yemen came and he was making tawaf of the Kaaba carrying his mother on his back. So can you imagine making tawaf carrying his mother? And this person here was saying in Raja's poetic meters, so you know the poetic meters. So he was saying in poetry that inni laha ba'iruha al-mudallal in udhirat rikabuha lam udhar. So he's saying that I am for her a submissive camel. If a camel would become a startle, I will not become startled. So that means, you know, sometimes a camel can become scared, or a camel can become like lazy. Maybe the camel can just sit down. So he's trying to say that I'm for her like this very subservient camel, but I'm actually better than a camel because if she was on a literal camel, then if she was literally on a camel, then the camel maybe would become tired, but I'm not going to become tired. I'm going to be so persistent. So, you know, now people ask the masala on making tawaf on a conveyance. So you can see tawaf on a conveyance is permissible. So so he was carrying his mother for the whole tawaf and like this year exerting himself basically. No matter what difficulty he had to go through, he was going through that difficulty. So after that he asked, oh Ibn Umar, do you think I have repaid her? So Ibn Umar said, no, not even for a single contraction of labor. So you know the contraction in labor. So even one time of that contraction, you haven't repaid her for even that amount. Then Ibn Umar, I'm going fast because of time, he continued his tawaf and then he came to the Maqam Ibrahim. He performed 2 rakats. Make dua Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes us also over and over to the Kaaba and also grant us the opportunity of making tawaf and grant us the opportunity of also performing tawaf, performing salah at the Maqam. So make this dua in passing because the dars of a hadith and you know it's the du'as are accepted. Then he said, O son of Abu Musa, indeed every 2 rakats expiate what came before. So basically, O son of Ibn Abi Musa, inna kulla rak'atin tukaffarani ma amamahuma. So it in every 2 rakats expiates and forgives your sins. So this narration, Alama Faki quoted it in Akhbar Makkah, Alama Marwazi quoted it in Al-Bir wa Sila, Ibn Abi Dunya quoted it in Makani Makhlaq, Imam Bayhaqi rahmallah quoted it in Shu'ab al-Iman. It's authentic in Ad-Dur al-Munaddad. It said, wa isnad al-hadith sahihun. Here it's quoted as the words of Ibn Umar radiyallahu anhu. Alama Bazzar rahmallah in his Musnad in Al-Bahr al-Zakhar, he quoted it as words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the person was carrying his mother, and then فَسَأَلَ النَّبِيَّ صلى الله عليه وسلم. So like how I told you yesterday, that even if it is the statement of Ibn Umar, then that still holds a lot of merit. But here, now they're asking the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, هل أديت حقها? So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لا ولا بزفرة واحدة أو كما قال. So the explanation of this here, so the word ذعر, it means khawf, or it means to be faza'. So wal murad lazim al faza' wa huwa al jaza'. This here Malana Ilyas mentioned in the Dar ibn Kathir edition in the footnotes. So if the camel becomes fearful, or it becomes startled, so just translated it as startled because for the word faza'. And then ud'irat, so this here in Ad-Durr al-Munaddad, it's explained also that it means faza'. Then the poem actually continues. It means حملتها أكثر مما حملت فهل ترى جازيتها يا ابن عمر. So that is how the poem is. You can see that I carried her more than she carried me. That how much she carried me. So maybe like he carried her not only while making the tawaf, he carried her from the place where they used to reside. So from there he comes, he's carrying her for so long. Now when you as a small baby, maybe she carried him less. So إني لها بعيرها المضلل إن أذعرت ركابها لم أذعر حملتها أكثر مما حملت فهل ترى جازيتها يا ابن عمر. So that is how the poem goes, that I carried her more than she carried me. So now do you think I have recompensed her? So Ibn Umar, and you can see even the Prophet ﷺ, if you go with the narration of Musnad Bazar, he's saying that even for that one contraction in labor, so that word zafra, Abu Musa al-Madini, he explained, وَكَانَ النِّسَاء يَزْفْنَ الْقَرْبَ يَسْقِينَ النَّاسَ فِي الْغَزْوِ. So it means that when they would carry, the literal meaning of it, when they would carry the bottles of water to go and serve the mujahideen. So you know the sahabiyat, they would nurse the mujahideen, they would make khidmah of the mujahideen, so they would carry that water bags. So that is Yazifna al-Qirb. Malafayzullah Jilani, he explained bizafra, it so in Fadlullah Samad on page 67, al-marra min al-zafir. And what's the meaning of that? وهو تردد النفس حتى تختلف الأضلاع وهذا يعرض للمرأة عند الوضع. Basically the contractions at the time of labor. So no matter how much khidmah you make for your parents, so the first narration showed that it's impossible to recompense your father. The second shows that it's impossible to recompense your recompense your mother. So for questions, inshallah, if you don't mind, then inshallah you can just ask all the questions on that link. Now we have the system. So if we have a system, then I don't have to also stretch now, and we don't have to make it so long. You know, some would want to stay till the end so that it could be told to them, قُومُوا مَغْفُورًا لَكُمْ, and also إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالْخَوَاتِيمِ. But when they're answering, then they have to leave early. So we do have a system now. So whatever questions you got, you can just ask on that. And if you ask me privately now, if you send me, especially when I just post an answer on the group, I just get like bombarded, like WhatsApp message, so many WhatsApp messages. So because there's no barakah in my time, so that is why I can't attend to all of those WhatsApp messages. I'll try to see, but now if you send me a private message, there's chances I might see it, maybe I won't see it, and then there's great chances that I won't respond to it. So you rather just, inshallah, click on that link, and then on that link, inshallah, you can send your question. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.